You see him on television all over the place, Tennis Channel, NFL Network. It's Steve Weissman. Needs no introduction, and he is here to tell his story on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a commentator at Tennis Channel and also a radio anchor at Fox Sports Radio. This is where we're going to go beyond just the work of Steve and learn about what he's like from a broader perspective, his tennis game, his upbringing, other elements of his life that aren't readily talked about. Steve, are you ready for this? This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to have
I'm
you
ready.
on.
I'm ready, Brian. I appreciate you having me on. I've listened to many of your interviews. You do a fantastic job. We're getting some really cool stories. A lot of folks that I know have been on this. I know we've been working on this to get together for a while now. I'm super proud of you that you've come on board the Tennis Channel family. And if we talked, I think back when you were doing some ITA tennis stuff
Yeah.
for college tennis, and it's been really cool to see your growth and to see these interviews. So thank you for having me.
Needless to say, I'm so proud of you, and I look at you as a mentor and an inspiration. And I wanted to start here. What is the greatest part about being an uncle?
About being an uncle, I love Marlo. It's just seeing the joy and the laughter of a child again. I think there's really nothing like that imagination, that spirit, that you have as a kid, the energy. I mean, I don't know where the energy goes, as we get older. But I had my niece over for Thanksgiving just a week or two ago. She was here for a week, and she's just always running around on the couch behind me, and constant energy, constant enthusiasm, that smile, that laugh. They say a child's laughter is the greatest thing on the planet, and it truly is something special. And so to be able to see her grow up. I was there minutes after she was born 8 years ago, and I've tried to stay as much as a part of her life as possible. I just got a message from my brother that she asking me what kind of tennis racket that he should get for her. So that's a great sign that just after spending a week with me, she already wants to play tennis. So we were watching a lot of sports when she was here, and so yeah, it's just pure joy, being an uncle and getting to see her grow up.
And clearly, your influence is rubbing off her in
I
many,
hope so.
yes, in many different ways. What do you miss most, Steve, about your own childhood?
Miss most. I love my childhood. I love the evolution of life though as well. So I'm very happy uh, in the place that I'm at. I think it's just spending that time with family, because as we get older, and I'm in LA now, and my parents are in Maryland, and my brother and his family are in New York, and so you just don't get to spend that time as much. And as you get older, you realize how valuable that is. And so those memories, those moments that we spent together growing up are things that I will cherish forever. And I try to cherish even more these days, because our time is finite, and you never know. So just the memories of spending time together with the whole family, holidays, the support that they always, gave to me in every avenue I ever, pursued, and, the trips that we took, stuff that you'll never forget.
What are those memories like when the whole family is together, when you were a youngster and your brother, and you were all out on the tennis court?
It was fun. We used to take a trip every summer to a place called Deep Creek Lake in Maryland. So I grew up in Maryland, and Deep Creek Lake is in Garrett County. It's in Western Maryland. It's about a 3-hour drive from where I grew up outside DC. And we would stop and find tennis courts. And there's a town called Accident, Maryland, random small town. And there were these two beautiful courts there. And, the four of us would play a lot, play doubles. This was in the early stages, so I was super young, and I was the littlest one on court, but I was probably the best player, I'll say. We surpassed our parents pretty quickly, and then I surpassed my brother as well. And so, but it was just so much fun to be out there with family playing a sport, because that's I love sports. I've loved sports since I was reading the Washington Post at 5 years old and just, knowing all the stats and playing basketball and playing soccer and, playing tennis and just doing everything I could athletically. And my family isn't super sporty, I would say. But, they always supported me in what I wanted to do. My dad's crazy into fitness. Like, he still teaches spin classes to this day. He taught kettlebell classes into his 70s and, really instilled a fitness kind of mantra into my life. Not sports per se, but just, working out. Growing up, he would always run 10 milers, 10Ks, stuff like that. And then, my mom always loved watching sports, and my grandmother on my dad's side, we would watch the Washington football team, Commanders now. Back in the day, they were a different name, every Sunday. And so that was special. And, getting to one of the coolest things, Bryan, I've ever gotten to do in my career was before I even had a paying job. I was an intern for the George Michael Sports Machine. This is back, I think, the summer of my sophomore year in college. So I'm not getting paid or anything. And George Michael was, a big sportscaster in the Washington, D.C. area. And they covered Washington training camp. And so it was in Frostburg State. And so one day I took my grandmother. At the time, I think she was like 93. She lived to be 100. And took her to training camp. It was like a 2-hour drive. We get there, set her up, right on the field. She's seeing all the players as they come off. They're saying hi to her. We go up to where George and Sonny Jurgensen and I think Brad Johnson, the quarterback at the time, were doing interviews and stuff like that. And Sonny was so nice to her, George as well. And it was just an amazing, experience for her and really special for me to be able to give her that, and she was, such a big football fan of that team, and to be able to give her that experience is something, that I'll always remember. I know she cherished all the way till the end and always talked about. And that was before I even had real access to things. So it was pretty cool.
You gave her that memorable experience. And when you look at the course of your career, Steve, what has been the basis of your motivation behind showing your parents what you can do and how much that has powered you during this journey?
It's interesting. I've always been super focused, Bryan. So I've always known, I knew since third grade what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be, which I know is very rare. And some people can be 40, 50 and still not know what they want to do. And that's totally fine. And you can still be extremely successful in any aspect of life. Obviously, if you need to go to school for a while, the quicker you do that, the better. But, I knew I interviewed this guy, Glenn Brenner, who was my hero growing up. He was the sportscaster at Channel 9 in DC. And I watched him every night. And when I was in third grade, I did this project, or I would go one day a week. It was called TOK, Thinking Opportunities for Kids. And they would take a select group of students from my elementary school and bus us to Piney Branch Middle School. And then, we had this career project, and I picked sportscasting. And I got to interview Glenn Brenner through some sort of connection. And I brought my little dictaphone, and he was so kind. And we sat down and did the interview, and I did this whole project. And I still have his, signed headshot. And unfortunately, he passed away pretty young. He was running the Marine Corps Marathon and had a heart attack out of nowhere. And but he was a huge influence on me wanting to do what I do now. And my parents always supported that. And the one thing with my parents from day one, their love is unconditional, like no doubt. And they tell me basically every time I talk to them how proud they are of me. So it was never, I never felt the need to prove myself to my parents. I always knew that I had their support no matter what, in success, in failure, and in between. So that was never a driving force. My driving force was just knowing exactly what I wanted to do and accomplishing it. And I think having that unconditional support is something that powers you. It's somewhat of a subconscious power, knowing that you always have not something to fall back on, but the fact that whatever you do, whether you fail or not, they're going to love you, they're going to support you, and they're going to think you're the greatest thing on the planet. So, that's a pretty special thing to have.
When you first got to talk with Glenn, what questions did you ask him?
I wish I still had the questions. I think I asked, what do I need to do to get into the industry? What should I major in college? You said I needed to have a broad liberal arts education. Those are the things that I remember. Obviously, I went to journalism school. So, that was something that, I knew I wanted to be and I wanted to get into, and that Northwestern had the best journalism school in the country and opportunities to do real on-air work while I was studying. And so that was the biggest thing. I did mainly radio in college. So freshman year, I joined WNUR Sports, and that station is broadcast in the entire Chicagoland area. And when WGN, who's the main carrier of Northwestern Athletics, has a Cubs game or something else that preempts it during the fall, we become the only live broadcast of a Northwestern football game or basketball game or something like that. So that was pretty cool to be a part of. And I knew freshman year that I wanted to be the sports director my senior year. And that's what I put all my energy into. And, senior year became sports director and, was able to call all those football games on the way to, winning the Big Ten title and going to the Alamo Bowl and traveling with the team. So, that was a remarkable, experience and getting to meet so many folks that worked at WNUR that, are now in the industry. I know, you spoke to Jeff Eisenband. He's younger than me, but he's a WNUR alum. Darren Ravel, who's a dear friend of mine, was the sports director the year before I was. Mike Lowe, who does news at WGN in Chicago, Mike Trudell, who's been doing a fantastic job at the Lakers for years now, was, I believe, a freshman when I was a senior, and he played soccer at Northwestern, super cool kid, knew he was going to be successful. And there's Randy Scott, I believe, was that same year, who's now on SportsCenter. So there's so many folks who went through that, WNUR Sports kind of radio training to get to where they are now.
You've gone through a lot of training when it comes to yoga. And you talked about how your dad, big into fitness, and perhaps that carried on into the way in which you look at life, where fitness is a big part of it. How has yoga changed your life?
Yeah, I did yoga this morning. So I made this call at noon so that I could do an 8:45 a.m. sweat and sculpt class, and then shower and be ready for this. So yeah, I base a lot of my life these days around yoga. In fact, Brian, based my current house around still being walking distance to my yoga studio, because when I first moved here, I lived in an apartment about a, I don't know, 10, 12-minute walk from where I currently live. And I knew I wanted to be here for a really long time. And so in looking at places to buy, I was like, I have to still be walking distance from Soho Yoga. And it really has changed my life. I would say mind, body, soul, everything. So for me, and it's the sweat and sculpt or the hot hit yoga. So I need that hot studio. I'm not doing it on the beach. I'm not doing it in the non-heated studio. And I'm normally doing a sculpt class, which includes weights, which includes cardio, and you're doing it in a studio that's about 100 to 105 degrees. So you walk in and you're already, getting sweaty, and you already need to towel off before you even start the movements. And for me, Brian, part of it is, in this day and age, I have my phone with me all the time, all the time. So when I'm in a class, you can't have your phone. You put it in a cubby, and for that hour, I am able to check out of everything, whether it's text messages, whether it's social media, whether it's phone calls, anything else, work related or personal related. For an hour, it's checked out. And so that's really important, I think, for mental health, and at least for me. And then it's the movement, it's the sweating, it's the weights, it's getting that workout in. So I know that in that hour, they're going to kick my butt, and I'm going to leave there and I'm going to be sweating for an hour after that. So I get that out of it. And then in the end, the Shavasana, I don't know how much yoga you've done, But at the end of class, you have Shavasana, which is, it depends, maybe it's 1 minute, maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. We're just laying there. And that's my time to kind of connect with myself, faith, say your prayers, say how grateful you are for everything that you've been given, everything that you have, your body that's gotten you through the past hour, all the people in your life that have, been there and continue to be there. And so all of that together is something that I treasure. And during the pandemic, it was really hard because, I stopped going to class, they canceled classes. And so for a couple of years, I didn't have that. And that was difficult. I'm not the type of person that was just going to do yoga at home. I don't have a sauna here. So, it wasn't going to be the same experience, but I was really grateful when, I was able to go back, because it's something that I do 4 or 5 times a week and has become a huge part of my life.
Cooking has been a big part of your life as well. And people need to realize that, like, you've got some serious talent in this space. And you talked about imagination and sitting in Shavasana and letting your mind go. But how does cooking also tap into your love of creativity?
In a huge way. It's the presentation for me. So, I mean, I think you see over that shoulder, the blue painting that I did that. All the artwork in my house, I've done myself. I specialized in art theory and practice in college. And so I grew up with a grandmother who was an artist on my mom's side. My great grandfather, so her father was an artist. His life, like my grandmother went to Cooper Union, which is a big art school in New York. And so from the time I was very little, I was doing sculpture. I was painting watercolors because I would see my grandparents every weekend. And growing up in DC, we would go downtown to the Smithsonian, to the East Wing Gallery, to all the museums. And so I had a lot of that culture and art in my youth growing up. And it was something that was just a part of life. And that's why, in college, it really helped me to kind of get that release and relaxation from the real work, whether it was journalism or math or science or whatever else it was. Having a project and being in an art studio by myself on a Saturday for 5 hours was awesome, and really allowed me to be creative. And so you can look at that and be like, oh, it's a 2 blue canvases. I could have done that, but you didn't think of it, right? And you go to a modern art gallery and maybe it has like one black circle in the corner of a white canvas. Like, what's so special about that? Well, you didn't think of it. That artist thought of it and put it together. And so when I'm cooking, and really everything in my life, but in cooking, it's the presentation. So it's how it looks, and unfortunately the camera does eat before I do, and because photography is a big part of it, and I love to get a good shot of what I do. But I do love to cook, and it's not just thrown together, and it's not, the scallops need to have the sauce, and then that sauce needs to be plated in a certain way, and the butter poached lobster has to be plated in a certain way, and everything has to look beautiful. And so that's part of the creativity, is finding a way to make food beautiful. And I watched a lot of Food Network and, a lot of Instagram reels of chefs and pastry chefs and all that stuff. But that is, the creativity and comes from my art background, just wanting everything to look a certain way and find that creativity.
I saw one of your Instagram reels, and it was you being an artist, but in a completely different way. You were doing basketball trick shots, and you had this basketball in your hands, and you had to be past midcourt, and you're throwing it behind your head. How many times did it take you, Steve, to make that shot after you pulled it off and you made it look effortless?
And not a ton, honestly, these days, because I've been doing that shot for years. That was kind of me and my friends. We would play basketball in high school growing up all the time. And then me and my buddy, Danny, would always go to the half court stripe and then just shoot behind the back shots for hours. And these days it's become my gym cool down. So at my gym, there's a basketball court, and it's another way. You mentioned earlier in the conversation, connecting with youth and, what I miss about childhood and stuff like that. And I think it's the nostalgia of things in your youth that bring you happiness. And so one of those things is shooting half court behind the back shots. And so when I'm done, with my workout and weights and intervals on the treadmill and all that stuff, I yearn for the court to be empty. A lot of times they're, running 5-on-5 and I can't get in there. But when it's empty, I'm just out there shooting, doing behind the back shots. And it brings me that youthful nostalgia, that joy. And so, it's not like the first shot I make, but I just posted something today, in fact, where it's with a Fabulous song, and the lyrics are like, "Do it one time, they won't, they won't believe you. Do the repeat, do it twice, they still don't, so you got a three-peat." So I showed it 3 times because I was like, you know what? Everybody's always like, how many times does that take for you to make?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll make it 3 times and show you. So a little ode to Steph Curry there. But it's a shot I've been doing a long time. I love doing trick shots and stuff like that, and just having fun and stuff that I did growing up.
So you tapped in your inner child and you find ways to do that in what brings you joy. At your age now, outside of your inner child, Steve, what brings you the most happiness?
I love where I live. I love the places where I work. I love the people in my life. And so I don't watching the sunset brings me a lot of joy. It's something that if I am not working when the sun is setting, I'm watching it over the ocean, and it never gets old. And maybe it's because I grew up in Maryland. Maybe somebody who grew up in LA would think differently, but it's about to be my 7-year anniversary in the LA area on December 10th. And I try to watch the sunset every single night over the ocean. And I was down at the beach last night, just, walked from pier to pier, barefoot on the sand, waited till the sun went down, took all my photos, and then was really cold walking home. But it's always worth it. And it's those little things that, I think nature always kind of brings you joy. And so I love what I do, and I truly, am passionate about work, and so that does bring me a lot of joy. Because I break down life into into 3 parts, because there's 24 hours a day, so you should sleep 8 hours a day. It's good for your health. It's good for your mind. All those things. Your body just works better if you sleep at 8 hours. So you should have the best mattress, the best sheets, the best pillow that you can afford, because over time, and you have these things for a while, financially speaking, you can make a third of your life 100% perfect, just like that, right? And then most people work 8 hours a day. Sometimes I work 13-hour days, and sometimes a little bit less, but generally people work 8 hours a day. So you should love what you do, and you should be passionate about it, because a lot of folks don't, enjoy their jobs, and they're starting life at a D+, right? That's a third of your life. And then the other third is, family relationships and stuff that you can't necessarily make 100% perfect. But if you've got the best betting around and you love what you do, that 66.66667% of your life, that's 100% perfect straight out the jump. So, that is something that brings me joy, and, getting to be active and just, be grateful for my health, really.
And as we count all of those things that you just said, and as I give you my final question here, Steve Weissman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. When you're walking on the beach, what are you thinking about?
Depends on the day. Every day is a little bit different, because our lives are never the same, right? And so most of the time when I'm walking on the beach, I'm trying to check out of whatever is going on in my mind. It's kind of like the shavasana of life. So, there are days where things are getting you down, and that walk on the beach lifts you back up. And there are days when you are already at a high and so happy, and that walk on the beach kind of humbles you, right? Because of the waves, and just realizing that the water is undefeated, and, there's so much out there that is not in your control. So whatever is going on in your life, I believe that walk centers me in a way that is truly beneficial and is undefeated for me on a daily basis.
You finding ways to center yourself, whether it's the walk, whether it's yoga, whether it's cooking. We think about what you've done work wise, and to account in this conversation how a lot of that's possible because of the attention and time you put into centering yourself and sleeping well and taking care of your body and all those things that you do. And so that is what we were able to accomplish here, Steve, is that people, they want to know where you got to and all that stuff. And that's important. But I want to know the grand scope of who you are and how all the puzzle pieces come together. There's a pie chart, and you eloquently described how it all works for you, and you broke it down so beautifully. Steve Weissman, host, commentator, Tennis Channel, NFL Network, the list goes on. I'm Bryan Fenley, a commentator for Tennis Channel. Steve, thanks so much, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. We went deep, and I really, really enjoyed the time.
Well, I enjoyed it as well, Bryan. Once again, it's a privilege to join you on this series, which I hope keeps going on for a long time, because you've gotten to talk to some amazing people and tell stories that otherwise I wouldn't have known personally. And I think it's an amazing resource for anybody in broadcasting, but just in general. So thanks again for having me, and look forward to seeing you soon.